Hi everyone! I hope that your spring and your reading are going well so far. Spring is my favorite season, so I've been enjoying the plants in my garden. I want to thank Read by Fred for helping me reach over 100 subscribers. Now let's get on topic. I haven't entirely stuck to my reading plan. I've read most of what I want to read, or what I meant to read. I do have extra time that I thought I wouldn't have, but I'm not sure I'll read what I planned to read for that eventuality. Let's talk about what I read and then what I could read for the rest of the month. First, since I didn't do an April wrap-up video, I'll tell you about what I read in the last half of April. The Island at the Center of the World by Russel Shorto was quite interesting. It wasn't quite as well written as Shorto's Revolution song, and the narrator isn't as good, but the information is worth having. The main takeaway from the book is that although I thought of the desire for representative government as an English trait, it was definitely a trait the US inherited from the Dutch colony as well. There were other traits like pluralism that were exhibited much more strongly by the Dutch than by the English. I'll post a video with my notes. The next book I finished was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I know that it's a beloved book, but I have mixed feelings about it. Part of me wants to lean into the warmth of her motherliness and aspects of her message, like living so that the land can be grateful for your presence. Part of me thinks that aspects of her commentary, especially on economics, were unlikely and impractical, although laudable in a way. I don't know how to meld multiple cultures under a constitution created by people who didn't have access to the knowledge we have now and who didn't bother to ask indigenous people to come to the constitutional convention at the time, a constitution we might well lose in a few months. The last book I finished in April was the Historathon book I had planned for May, but started early because I had extra time. Everyday Life in Medieval London, from the Anglo-Saxons to the Tudors by Toni Mount, has some background chronology, especially in the first half, but it also contains sections on the church, business and apprenticeships, plague, personal and household cleanliness, shopping and household accounts, holidays, and sports. It did a good job of giving a practical understanding of what living in London would have involved back then. Toni Mount has tried many of the daily living practices common at the time, and so can add her personal experiences with them. Mount's writing style is friendly and approachable, so that's good. Unfortunately, I listened to this book at night and at other times when taking notes wasn't convenient, like doing yard work and whatnot, so I don't have notes to share. It would make a good reference book if you needed one for writing a novel or for a research project. Now let's talk about the books I've read during this month. I read 3 books for Children's Book Week. I read Baseball Saved Us by Ken Mochizuki. This is a picture book about the experience of a boy who lived in an internment camp both during and after World War II. He was no good at baseball before the war, but playing in the camp improved his skill. After the war, it gave him a way to fit in to some extent with white kids who hated Japanese people. Out of the 3 children's books I read, this one was the shortest and seemed to be aimed at the youngest children. It's listed for ages 5 through 8. Barbed Wire Baseball by Marissa Moss. It follows Kenichi Zenimura, who is a famous baseball who immigrated to Hawaii from Japan at age 8. He played for the Yankees during the 1930s. During World War II, he and his family were forced into an internment camp. There, he made a baseball field from very few materials and organized 32 teams. Barbed Wire Baseball is the story of the effort of Zenimura and other Japanese Americans to make their baseball field from a desert. This also has pictures, but is a bit longer and expects children to be a bit more socially sophisticated. It's listed for ages 6 through 9. A Sporting Chance, How Ludwig Guttmann Created the Paralympic Games by Laurie Alexander. Ludwig Guttmann was a Jewish neurologist who escaped Nazi Germany and was assigned to take over a new hospital unit in England treating paraplegic patients. He had seen the typical policy of letting patients die as quickly as possible. Instead, Guttmann tried to get patients healed, sitting up, and involved in job training and sports as quickly as possible. Eventually, this culminated in the creation of the Paralympic Games and laws in Olympic cities to make their cities more wheelchair accessible. This is a juvenile nonfiction book. It reads as if it's aimed at fourth graders and up if reading on their own. I would think it would make a good book report book. It's listed for ages 8 through 12. If I gave it to an 8-year-old, I would read it with them. I wish there was an adult biography of Guttmann, but there isn't. I'm also slowly working on my American history project. I'm still in the colonial period, but now I'm reading about Jamestown. I have 3 books on Jamestown, but I may only read 2 of them because Jamestown is depressing. One is finished, and I'm almost done with the second. I'll do a separate video with my notes on the Jamestown books. The first book I read was Marooned, Jamestown, Shipwreck, and a New History of America's Origin by Joseph Kelly. It's a political history of the beginning years of Jamestown, including one of Jamestown's presidents who was briefly shipwrecked in Bermuda. Kelly portrays the first years of the settlement as a horrific dystopia, especially the starving time, created by the mismanagement of various colony presidents. Besides finishing Marooned, I have an hour left on 1619, Jamestown and the Forging of American Democracy by James Horne. Horne chronologically takes over where Kelly leaves off. Horne has a more rosy view of the government of Jamestown, justifying the more authoritarian, frankly horrifying goings-on as necessary due to the time of war early on in the settlement, which Kelly argues were at least partly self-inflicted and unnecessary. He really skips over the details because he's mostly starting in 1619. He also takes a more rosy view of the representative nature of the government. He thinks of it as advanced. So many high-level gentlemen were invested in the company that the government could incorporate the most up-and-coming ideas of the age. The Time Trader series. For those who watched my TBR video, I was asked by a viewer to read a time travel novel. I intended to read just one, not realizing it was part of a 7-book series. Instead, I ended up listening to the first 4 books of the Time Trader series by Andre Norton. I'll post a separate review video for those 4 books. For now, I'll just say that although there were elements that were of their time, it was still an enjoyable story. If I had time, I was going to participate in Springathon by reading Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard. Instead, I'm finding myself drawn to Orca by Jason M. Colby. I've just started it, so I don't have much to report, but killer whales seem like a fascinating species so far. It seems that although display of orcas had some sort of ethical problems that I'm not familiar with because I don't live anywhere near an ocean, it also may have saved the species from extinction by creating in the public mind a sympathy for them as more than simply dangerous sea pests to be eradicated from salmon fishing areas. If I had further time, I was going to participate in Mental Health May. I'm still not sure that I'll have time for it, but I might. I neglected to put My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa and Menakem on hold soon enough, so I won't get to that one. But I just found another book called The Mind-Body Stress Reset, Somatic Practices to Reduce Overwhelm and Increase Well-Being by Rebekkah, LaDyne, and Kathy L. Kain that is immediately available to me. So if I have time, I might start that one and work on it slowly. Or I might start another history project book, like the third Jamestown book, or maybe a sports book. Maybe I might start a summer of sport book early, since I have more sports books on my list than I could possibly read in the allotted time. Or maybe I'll start a wild card book. I'm really not sure. I have also been trying to finish a couple of books that weren't on the schedule, but I happened to start a while ago. The Art of English Murder by Lucy Worsley is a ghoulishly interesting book about how murders and their solving and punishment became entertainment in England. I have about 3 hours left on the audio. How to Be a Tudor by Ruth Goodman is probably more suited to the next quarter of Historathon, but who's counting? It's about daily life in the Tudor period, and it goes into all the practical details of how people stood based on social class when they rose, broke from morning chores for breakfast, who could likely read and write, how to buy fabric, sumptuary laws, etc. I haven't been taking notes on that one since I've been listening while doing yard work and stuff, and I've got about 6 hours left on that one. Well, at long last, I think that's everything. Happy reading.